All right, looks like we are live on air on Thinking Critical YouTube. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. This is Wes, your host as always. We got a great panel for you today. We're still waiting on Brett Smith here, but we got a message from him. Sounds like he'll be in any minute, but we wanted to get things started, get the introductions out, and maybe a couple brief comments before while we were waiting on him. So first on the panel, returning, Perch, what's going on, man?
Hey there, how's everybody doing? Glad to be here.
Awesome. Next, we got our other retail expert, Pele. What's going on?
Hey, beautiful Sunday morning. About 88 degrees outside. Don't go out unless you have air conditioning in your car.
Absolutely.
Doing well.
And finally, my co-host, Doc. What's going on, buddy?
What up, guys? How you guys doing this morning?
Oh, I think we're all doing just captain. All right, so we're going to have a little conversation about the comic book industry. Pele and Perch were having a conversation a couple weeks ago. I was like, this is all great stuff. They're like, we should do this one day. And then a couple of things came up. We decided we want to talk about them. So, we're just going to talk about the overall health of the industry. I got some topics that we're going to run through, some stories I want to talk about. So first, Doc, what are your thoughts on the current state of the comic book industry? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? What kind of what's your position on it?
I don't think it's healthy. I think it's not, it's not dying, but it's definitely on the decline and needs a lot of maintenance. But it requires entertainment companies to learn correct lessons from market forces. And as I said, I think yesterday, I'm pretty certain that entertainment companies are completely incapable of learning the correct lessons from literally any market force. So I think it's going to keep going in the way it's going until you get somebody, running get some people running some of these companies that are going to that actually do know what the hell they're doing.
I just think it's weird that we have situations where it doesn't really seem to matter that they're losing money. You would think that, this is capitalism. These are businesses, but they're businesses who really don't seem to care whether they make a profit, and everything is cronyism and nepotism and scratch my back, I scratch yours, and failing upwards. And it's just the most insane horse shit I've ever seen as far as any business, any form of industry. But
all right, so what are your thoughts, Perch?
Yeah, it's I don't take quite as negative view, but I think the key to all this is that when you're doing well, you take advantage, you reap those profits. And when things decline or when they're in a slow state, you got to secure yourself. And we've had, to me, the disappointment is that they've had this boom with the movies. They've had more attention in pop culture. They've got a lot of people who are seeing the property for the first time, and they're not capitalizing on any of that. They're keeping the property separate. They're not doing the things they need to do to capitalize on all the attention. And that's the big drop of the ball moment. That's where right now they should be, growing immensely and putting the best people on the books and paying more rates so they can get better artists and better writers, and they should be building. And we are headed for a decline. The publishing industry is very weak. The retail industry is weak. So we are headed, and superhero fatigue will set in, and the movies won't do as well. So now's the time you should be building up that credibility and that bank and those solid issues while you're riding that wave. So I don't think, people are saying we're seeing a crash right now. I think we're going to see the crash. And because they haven't built up that credibility and that foundation, it's going to make that crash much, much worse. It doesn't need to be. Ups and downs are normal. They're not protecting themselves for the downs.
Go ahead.
I think that part of the thing is that a lot of these.
Brett.
Oh, welcome, Brett.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
Morning, Brett.
Welcome to the stream. So we're just talking about the current state of the comic book industry before we get into some of the main topics.
Gotcha.
Doc, what were you talking about?
Oh, I was just going to say that it feels like a lot of the publishers have forgotten that they are comic book publishers, that is their core product. Now, it might not be the most lucrative product. All of the secondary, tertiary products, the toys, the video games, the movies, the licensing, the TV shows, all that is going to be far more lucrative, obviously. But the core product at the end of the day, when the general pop culture starts getting bored with superheroes, when, as Perch was saying, this is their opportunity to bank, the goodwill, start rebuilding their comics line, so that when that inevitable fatigue happens in the pop culture and those secondary and tertiary revenue sources aren't as profitable or start going away entirely, they have their core product to fall back on, and they're not doing that because they all think that they'll be able to just jump over to one of those studios or game designers or writing movies. And even if it's not writing superhero movies anymore, if they get into Hollywood, then they can write anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they've all forgotten what their core product is.
So, Brett, what are your, just initial brief thoughts on the current state of the industry before we kind of get into some more specifics?
I think I agree with a lot of that. I think that they could be, experimenting with new IPs. They could be building new characters, new products, new things, because the superhero fad, will eventually burn out in Hollywood. That doesn't mean that graphic novels and comics can't be a springboard for future potential movies, animation, different types of things. I think that graphic novels and comics are really it's one of the perfect mediums for testing out if an IP or a story or a character has legs, because I'm getting a lot more of that. People approaching me and saying, we're interested in doing live action, we're interested in doing movies, we're interested in doing animation. However, we'd like to start out with a graphic novel and build an audience and see if this thing has legs and if it has potential. And because, frankly, the cost of producing a graphic novel, even if you're talking about using Marvel and DC artists, American artists, is a drop in the bucket in comparison to what it would cost to go out and shoot 30 minutes of film. That's about $1,000 a foot when you're buying cellophane. And these red cameras, these digital things, they're not that much more cheaper. They're expensive. And it's just not the camera, it's just not the cellophane, it's a crew. It's craft services, it's everything else. It's points, which is, money on the back end. So I just finished about a month ago, I finished a 98-page graphic novel with Chuck Dixon that started actually before Jawbreakers. I had been developing it and working with these guys who were Hollywood guys who had a 12-page treatment, which Chuck Dixon and I turned into a 98-page graphic novel. And these guys are Hollywood guys, and they're filmmakers, and they've made movies before and TV series, and they're just kind of like, what, we want to do a graphic novel of this first. For one, we only have a 12-page treatment, so we need to actually fill out the story and the characters and everything, which is where you guys come in. But this graphic novel is going to help establish this IP, start to build an audience. We're gonna utilize the graphic novel as high-end storyboards to go out and try and rope in more investors, so we can have a bigger budget. And right now there's somewhere around 15 or 20 million, which is about what M. Night Shyamalan had to work with on Glass.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that everybody needs to kind of look at it everybody's kind of like at 10,000 feet, and it's time to get some elevation and look at it from 30, 40, 50,000 feet. Comic books are not just exclusively superhero comics. They can tell history. They can be fiction, nonfiction. Like Clinton Cash, they can be political. They can be, by way of using satire. So, I think the future for comics, graphic storytelling, and graphic novels is extremely bright. For those who are kind of looking at it from a much larger, vantage point. And this graphic novel I did with Chuck, it's a werewolf Western. It's a horror, so it's not superhero. It's actually kind of a period piece. It is a period piece. It's set in the early 1900s, late 1800s, and it's going to come out, I think, in October now. Originally, we had wanted it to come out in the summer, and it can still come out in the summer, but the clients, the guys who actually paid for it, were actually kind of like, we want to wait. I think we want to do something like around Halloween. We're thinking October now, and we'll build anticipation, 30 days, till Halloween, and kind of do a countdown. It's a werewolf, so they're thinking, like 30 days till the full moon or something, the harvest moon. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts, man. I just watched Shazam last night, and it was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Zachary Levi's muscle suit. I think he could have worked out 4 hours a day rather than 2 hours a day. His neck wasn't big enough. Henry Cavill has really ruined it for everybody, frankly, because the guy is such a beast, and and he is the standard. So and Affleck matched him. Affleck was just as big, maybe bigger. So those two guys, have set the standard. And frankly, I'm just, dude, don't do a muscle suit. It looks ridiculous.
Everyone can always see the anomaly.
Well, I'm still certain that's the reason why they went with Fat Thor for Endgame, because Hemsworth, it was either put him in a muscle suit or have skinny Thor, because he was skinny to do Men in Black. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have time to work out because he was shooting them both around the same time.
It's a lot harder to bulk up than it is to lose it, because he lost about 50% of it for Rush. Yeah. He came off Avengers, and he wanted that part. He wanted to play James Hunt, like in the worst way. And I don't blame him. Anybody that knows who James Hunt is would want to play James Hunt. And if you have not seen Ron Howard's Rush, you need to go out and watch it. It's a fantastic movie. It's probably it is the most un-Ron Howard movie you will ever see. It is just, I watched that movie and I was like, this is a Ron Howard movie? I was like, no way. There is no way. It's not shot. There's the pacing. It has, sex and drugs and indulgence. And, Ron's always kind of like halfway into like Hallmark Channel territory to a large degree most of the time, which is fine. I think that's great. But it was a great movie. But he said that he approached Ron Howard and said, I want to play this. And Ron Howard said, I'd love to have you play it, but you're just too big. You're coming off Avengers. And he said, and Chris said something like, oh, don't worry about that. He's like, I'll be half the size. I'll be half the size by the time principal photography starts. And that's because he just, it's so much easier just to let yourself go. It's the same with Russell Crowe. He came off Gladiator and had to play Jeffrey Wigand in The Insider, who's like an overweight middle-aged dude. So Russell said that he went on a diet. He went from the strict regimental workout from playing Maximus to eating cheeseburgers and drinking whiskey all day long. And that's what put him in Jeffrey Wigand shape. So, yeah, right.
All right.
Yeah.
Enough with this.
Brett, I was going to say, no, wait, to your comments, I think I can't agree more. I think a lot of the arguments take place. People take, you said they need to go up, I think either up or down. I think you look at the comic industry as a whole through one lens, and that's the traditional Marvel DC superhero lens. But the opportunity for storytelling, for cost saving, for testing out these markets and all the rest, it's powerful. And I think we will see a lot more of that because it just makes financial sense. I think the vehicle to sell those is still one that needs to be developed. There's just not enough places, in some cases, to get them out. And I think a lot of the current people in comics are not naturally going to migrate over to these other businesses. They don't know it well enough. You get a very clear sense of who's got a good business sense and who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But when I hear things like, "Oh, the whole comic industry is dying. It's all going to be dead in 2 years," it's not going to be dead.
Bullshit.
Well,
That's just bullshit. I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Not at all.
The fastest. This is what I wanted to get to on this. One thing I want to point out is that the idea that the comic book industry is dying is a lie, because the fastest growing collector industry in the world is the back issue comic book industry. Right now, year over year, the value of the top 250 comic books in the world has gone up 18% year over year for 4 years. Nothing does that. The NASDAQ doesn't do that. Stocks don't do that. Bonds don't do that. Nothing in the world does that, except maybe Bitcoin when it was going ballistic for 180 days. And there's a demand out there for comics that is untapped, because the industry has slipped so far into the woke culture, and the fans are waiting, saying, I have money. I need to buy comics. Where can I buy comics that I like? And, oh, here's some comics. Marvel's going here. DC's going here. Here's some comics. No, I don't want those. I don't want your woke stuff. I want traditional superheroes. I want the classic hero's journey type story. And we don't have that. We've got this over here. We've got this chick here that weighs 800 pounds, but she can fly. And no, I don't care about that. No, I don't.
That's why their back issues are up.
And back issues, then that's the point. Yeah. Back issues right now are so hot. I have people I'm paying, and doing it myself, people I'm paying full time just to find comics.
Right.
I'm paying full guide for comic books just so I can sell them at guide and a half.
That's why the future is trades for Marvel and DC. They're not going to make comics for much longer. They're going to get out of that business altogether and print back issues. It was Blake Northcott posted the other day that I think back issues that are up like 30%. People are buying.
Not collectible. But they're not collectible. They want the original. People want the original newsprint comics. Yeah. They want those original comics because they have that historical context, because they have that period context.
But they're also buying reprints. They're also buying reprints.
But not in the same. They're not going to pay the same amounts. I mean,
what I'm trying to say is that's good all around. Buying the old stuff, and buying the reprints. It's that's a twofer for people like us. Because
most customers that I know that are collectors, they'll buy the original, and then they'll buy the reprint. They'll put them both together, and they read the reprint so they don't they don't damage the original, because they need to keep it in high condition.
Same here.
They need to keep it. They need to keep it in good condition. So, because condition is everything with a vintage comic. That's
what I've been doing, man. I mean, I own all of the all of the Ultimates floppies from the 2000s, volumes 1 through 3, which is all Millar and Hitch. But I just bought the what is this thing called? The Ultimate Collection, which is a trade, and I think it's volumes 1 and 2, and then it's got like this cool, almost kind of like, what is this? Ultimates commentary featuring Mark Millar and Brian Hitch, which is sort of like a director's commentary, and it's got Millar and Hitchy waxing poetic about certain scenes throughout the book, which is really cool.
It's a great
and then it's obviously got all of the covers collected and whatnot, and the pinups and stuff. But I like this because I can put this on my bookshelf, and I can go to it. It's good for reference. It's the other reason why I like the trades, is because I can put them on a bookshelf. You can't do that with floppies, but either way, I think it's fantastic that for one, the spike in 30% on the back on the trades tells me that obviously, like what we're talking about is people want the classic stories. They don't want the woke stuff. They don't want this modern crap. And then on top of that, it just tells me that people are still buying. Print is not dead, because along with saying that comics is dead, a lot of those same people who are just sort of cynical in nature in general say the same thing about print, is that it's dead, and I don't believe that. I don't believe that either.
The factors for print being dead is just a lot different. It's people compare it to Asia and Japan. I spent a decent amount of time there. It's a very different market. It's a non-driving market. It's a commuter market. There's a lot of reasons why digital will flourish there. There's a lot of reasons why it's going to really struggle in the US. They're just completely different mediums.
Well, one of the
Go ahead.
One of the other things is often the people that are complaining that, well, print's dying. They're comparing it to periodical magazines and newspapers, and
Right.
they're not comparing it to the print book market. And the print book market has been up every year since 2012 in units and dollars.
Yep.
And they whereas comics are much more similar to while the periodical nature is more similar to magazines and newspapers, the actual story and rereadability and how they, magazines and newspapers, the day that after they come out, they're pointless.
They're perishable. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. They're disposable. Whereas books and comics have reusability that doesn't exist in the other periodical market, and they want to keep comparing it to magazines and newspapers and say, well, look at all these newspapers and magazines folding up. Well, that's fine, but it's not. It's an apples and oranges comparison.
Yeah, I'm not going to read.
They're trying to make excuses for their failures. I mean,
I'm not going to read an article, 30 times or 40 times or 100 times, but I will read a comic book that many times. And, the other thing that I like about the trades, the collected stuff is, and you can do this with really any comic, but, and it's something that Alan Moore said. He said, the comics are like a time machine that you can kind of, if you've already read it, you can jump in the middle, you can jump in the beginning, jump in the back, and still have an incredibly fulfilling, interesting experience. Yeah, and you can notice new things. So it's a very interactive medium, more interactive than TV or film or live action. It might be on the level of video games as far as engaging the reader in every panel, because that's one of the functional things about comics, which is different from TV and movies and live action, is that there's always something going on in every panel in order to keep the reader engaged, the immersive world encompassed, and also moving forward from panel to panel. So it's very different. It's a very different medium. It's a very misunderstood medium. People don't understand its power. I look at the comic book industry as a whole, and I think to myself, it's a very small industry. It's very insular. It doesn't think outside the box. It's had the same stupid one distributor for 25 years. So I'm always thinking, okay, how the hell do we get out of here? How do we get out of this stupid box that we're in? And frankly, the way out is the book market, which is a much larger and more expansive and expanding market. And a lot of people that read books will read graphic novels, and then I think about all the people out there that don't read books at all, that hate basic prose, that can't make it through, even a 250-page book, which is probably about the average for most people. Not everybody's going to sit down and read War and Peace or Atlas Shrugged. I couldn't. I couldn't make it through Atlas Shrugged, but
I did 3 times.
But I watched all 3 movies.
I thought it was a wonderful book.
Well, I mean,
it was a great movie.
It is a good book, or it's a good story. It's got a good message. The movies were awful. They were.
I like the movies, but I'm weird anyway.
You know what? The movies were Kirk Cameron B movie bullshit. So this is my problem with this is my problem with people on the right, is when they do pop culture, they do entertainment, they always do it on the cheap. And that's exactly what they did with those 3 movies. So they should have shot them all at the same time. But what they did was they went onesies and twosies. Okay, now we've got money for the first one. So we're going to hire this crew and these actors. Oh, 3 years later, we have money for the second one. Oh, no. We've got to go out and hire an all-new crew and all-new actors because nobody's available.
People on the right are too busy putting their money in investments rather than investing in...
No, that's not. That's not true.
It is true. It's because I talked to them, but I talked to the investors, and they're actually putting the money into mutual funds, money market accounts, where they should be putting their money into investable cultural items. And I keep talking to them about it, like, why you need to actually, is take the money you've got right now, and that you've gotten in municipal bonds that's getting you 7.5%, and then why don't you invest in this film over here? That's
but Brett,
but that's risk, and
they put their money into white papers. They put their money into political ads. They put their money into candidates. Those are all losers. Those are all losers.
You're talking 0.5% there.
Brett has a point, though.
It doesn't matter, dude. They're pouring billions of dollars into these think tanks, which give Fox News people like Karl Rove, so they can continue to pour money down a sewer, which is going to give them 1% and a shitty product, which isn't going to move anybody. The only guy that's making any money is Dinesh, and he poured $7 million. He poured $7 million into Hillary's America, and he doubled that money. But he's preaching to the choir. But those same people that pour money into the think tanks and into the white papers should be pouring money to me. I'm the guy that turned Clinton Cash into a New York Times #1 bestseller and actually moved the needle.
Those aren't the people I was talking about. I'm not talking about political types. I'm talking about the investor.
I am, because that's no. The investor types in the political.
Very few of the people I'm talking about actually care about politics in so much as how much they have to pay taxes. That's all they care about. I'm sure there's a small fraction.
I'm talking about the money people that give money within politics.
I know, but I wasn't talking about that to begin with. I was talking, I don't know.
That's the investor class in DC. Okay.
But Brett has a point.
So Perch has a good. What are you saying, Perch?
Yeah. Brett has a good point here. I think that taking back to comics entertainment industry, there is something different about, in a lot of cases, the left and the right. In that the right, going back to Atlas Shrugged, there is a case where the right, when they're investing money and they're doing these things, there's almost this assumption that the team is just going to stick around from project to project. They don't lock them up. They make a lot of very amateur mistakes in putting these things together. Where
they're inexperienced with dealing with such things.
They are inexperienced, and this is a case where they need to, in some cases, they need to learn the business. They need to learn from people who are surviving within it. But there's almost a, hey, I'm not going to touch that because that's left culture. I don't want to sink into it.
Exactly.
That's
you asked them about
learn from the experts.
You asked them about the performance of the top 10. Municipal bonds, and they'll be able to tell you everything. But they don't know pop culture. They don't know pop culture. They don't know,
and they refuse to get into it. They refuse
cultural materials. It's not what interests them.
We've had so many shops and boards in the retailer world where somebody will open up a shop, clearly a left-leaning store, which doesn't matter. If they're going to sell comics to a mass, sell the comics. It doesn't really matter if the politics are not going to hamper the business, but you see people reaching out like, hey, let me help you with how rent is done. Let me tell you about how you can find places that are going to maximize your dollar, help you stay in business. And there's this arrogance of, no, I won't learn from that other side. And you should always just try and learn from the experts. Whoever they happen to be, whatever politics there, you should learn from the experts and run your business smart. But a lot of people don't.
But then you have the left on the other side who's like saying, we don't understand storytelling. And we have to make everything political to the point where it bludgeons people over the head and they turn away from the product. It always cuts both ways. People don't like to learn from each other. It does.
All right. So I just want to get on to another topic. We mentioned it earlier. Dan Didio was at San Diego Comic-Con, was lamenting that their facsimile reprints are outselling new comics of the same characters. But he's saying that he believes it's because they obviously haven't gone far enough with their storytelling. And I don't believe he's really understanding the real message that the customers are sending to him. Like, Perch, what do you take from that? I think that's people telling Dan Didio and DC and Marvel that we don't like the direction that you've taken your comic books. We want you to. I would rather watch something that or read something that was printed 20 years ago because the quality is better and I like the story more.
It's just the quality is better. It's I think in many cases people overthink it. The quality of those books in a lot of cases are better. They had a better art team. They had a better writer team.
The content was better.
Well, they weren't writing for 6 issues. They weren't writing like it was going to get canceled and rebooted in 6 issues. It's not. I mean, it cherry picks the very best out of 30, 40 years of the industry. And of course, those are going to perform better. I mean, it's not a big shock. I think the Didio's mistake, like I wrote about, is, hey, figure out why those stories were great. Try and emulate them rather than immediately jump to, oh, let's figure out what the next big thing is out of nowhere. Try and figure out why those comics did well.
Well, you can take any like random comic though from like the 70s or 80s, like X-Men or Amazing Spider-Man, and that story itself is superior quality to what the story is being told today. And the story itself resonates with the people who are the comic, the majority of comic buyers, more than the story that's being told today. And the story that's being told today is something that doesn't resonate with them, and that people believe. I mean, from what I talk to my customers, that they're like, I don't really care about, a 700-pound woman flying, story, that what's the point of that, and I'm like, well, some people really like Faith, and no, give me back, give me these stories over here. I want my hero's journey. Mm-hmm. So
Brett,
it's content.
Do you think it's a problem with the industry where you have too many writers with the intent purpose of influencing people and their opinions rather than the intent purpose of entertaining the audience? Do you think it's gone too much to that direction?
Yeah, I also think that it's kind of a Nike thing. I think very much what all these publishers are doing is similar to what Nike is doing, which is just capitalizing on kind of this angst, teenage angst. I want to, whatever my parents are into, I'm not into. That's lame. Colin Kaepernick isn't even a professional athlete. I mean, he doesn't even have a job, and he hasn't for a long time. And even when he did,
Amen.
he wasn't very good at it. So, he's the flavor of the month because that I worked in advertising along with comic books. Worked in advertising for 20 years doing TV, print, storyboarding, TV commercials and print and whatnot. And I just kind of look at this thing as just sort of marketing 101. This is one angle. It's a very short-term kind of plan as far as what they're trying to do with marketing their shoes and all the other crap that they sell through Colin Kaepernick. And this is eerily similar to Charles Barkley in the 90s. I'm not a role model. The only difference is that Charles is back then the left were center. They weren't communists, they weren't radicals like we have today. So that's sort of how it's playing out as far as Nike. And I think a lot of what Marvel and even DC to some extent is doing is just sort of kind of peppering their books with this kind of leftist nonsense and this agenda driven crap. And a lot of it is, I think, to tap into some kind of what they think is like a readership amongst the young that's going to resonate with them. And, that's never going to work. And all you got to do is just look at Rock the Vote. MTV and the DNC spent 30 years trying to influence young people through Rock the Vote on MTV, and it never worked. And then Rock the Vote became Vote or Die. That was P. Diddy. And then I think it changed again. And they keep going back to that anvil, but there's nothing there. Young people are not interested. And I remember when I had the first opportunity to vote, it was probably like, I think 96. And it made me think about it the other day because Ross Perot was in the fight. And my parents were voting for Ross Perot. Ross Perot, just passed away recently. But I was just thinking about that. I remember that year, and that was the re-election or the end of the first Clinton administration. And I was thinking, everybody was on me. you got to go out and vote, Brett. My aunt was, my dad, everybody was like, you got to out and vote against Clinton, get this guy out of there. And I was just kind of like, I don't really care. I don't really care, because I didn't at that point. I think I was 18 or 19. I had just gotten my job with Chaos Comics, and I didn't give a shit about any of that stuff, even though I did like Ross Perot. I thought he was funny, and that was largely due to Dana Carvey.
Yeah.
So, I
really love those. He did
Yeah.
such a great job with those infomercials. I don't know if anybody else, they don't do this nowadays, but yeah, these awesome. Ross Perot would pay for an hour of main network time on primetime TV on a Monday night when the biggest, he'd pay for an hour of primetime television just to bring out his charts and graphs to explain how he could fix the economy. And it was amazing. It was absolutely awesome. But
that's why the Clinton dynasty exists, though.
Yeah.
He captivated baby boomers, who were the target demographic at the time. And nowadays, you'd probably draw more of an audience, with a Tupperware infomercial. I mean, it's that kind of marketing is just antiquated. It doesn't work anymore. It works with old people, but if you're trying to go after, and old people, I mean, boomers and World War II generation, but if you're trying to go after Gen Xers or Gen Y or Gen Z, it ain't going to happen. Yeah, it is, because they got all the money. But that'll change soon as they die off. And or as they bequeath, what they have left, which they got from their grandparents, to their Gen Xers. That's changing. So it's interesting. You look at the Democrat, the Republican Party right now. The Republicans have a shit ton of Gen Xers. And they have, and the baby boomers are getting edged out. They're leaving. What's interesting, you look at the Democrat Party, is they're just chock full of millennials and boomers, and they have a deficit of Gen Xers, which I think is really fascinating, because that's the transition, that's the handing off. It's the boomers will never pass the torch. We're going to have to wrestle it from their cold dead hands, basically.
Yeah, it's the Gen Xers are the I'll do it on my own, I don't need your help kind of. I'm very self-reliant generation.
We're the latchkey kids, man.
Yeah. We're the middle children.
I was reading what they were talking about, that they said that the millennials are the furthest left of any other generation that we've ever had before. I mean, we're talking like Karl Marx type levels of leftism. And then but they looked at it and they said, wait a second, Gen Z that's coming up is as conservative as the silent generation, which was like, World War I, World War II types. And it's like, wow, they're that conservative.
It's the pendulum. It swings the other way, as it does, with nearly every generation. You have an equal to or opposite reaction to, to your parents or to the, prevailing winds of the culture. And, that's why I have a lot of hope, in the future of America. I think that, from the standpoint of changing hearts and minds, comics and graphic novels are a great place, to do that. It's a fantastic medium, in order to get messages across and, to touch upon the, quote unquote money people and investor class, on the right. The only way that they're going to win hearts and minds back is going to be through the culture. You're not going to do that in the pit of the Senate. You're not going to do it with a piece of legislation, because people aren't tuned into that. The mass majority of people start paying attention to that about 30 days before an election, and the rest of the year, they're consuming entertainment, and that's all dominated by that's all. Well, I mean, it's once every 2 years, once every 4 years that people focus on this stuff. And the rest of the time they're getting indoctrinated through pop culture, which is dominated by the left, which is why, I believe Andrew Breitbart was
I was
right
about to point that out.
Yeah, when he said that politics is downstream from culture. And there's a great interview with him and Brian Lamb, where Andrew was on a book tour for Righteous Indignation. And Brian Lamb said, hey, why are you so angry? You've got all this good stuff going on. You got Rush Limbaugh, you've got Eurosite, you've got Drudge, you've got Fox News. And Andrew's just like, that's not good enough. AM radio is the lowest form of communication. We can't rely on AM radio, op-eds, Fox News, and Rush Limbaugh and Drudge. He said, Brian Lamb said, well, what do you want? And Andrew looked at him and just said, I want it all. I want everything. I want Avatar. Where is our Avatar? You will know that the right is committed to the culture war when we have our own Avatar. And that's what I am going around and preaching to everybody that I know on the right. It is time to get engaged and invest in the culture. And that means putting your money where your mouth is and taking it out of those mutual funds. Stop giving it to that punk Karl Rove, who's just a black hole for money. Give it to me, and we'll turn a profit. We'll turn a profit and change the culture at the same time.
What's interesting, this kind of goes back with the situation as far as the sales in comics are concerned. How many of you have heard about the Alexandria Cortez comic book?
That's my old boss.
Came out? Yeah. How many of you have heard about the comic book?
Blaylock.
No, but it's dead. I mean, that comic came out, and I'm in the Seattle area. I couldn't sell 5 copies of that.
That's the point. Everybody's heard about it.
He even got Fox News. He got Fox and Friends coverage, and it's still bombed.
Everybody talked about it. Everybody knows about the comic book. The comic book was on everybody's lips for 2-3 weeks, solid. That sold 1,800 copies.
Dude,
it didn't even sell enough. It didn't even sell enough copies to make back the initial investment that the guy borrowed the money to print the comic book. Did not even make enough money. He ended up having to give away the final 700 copies because he had a 2,500 copy print run.
Dude, that's hilarious.
That tells you everything. Activists are not customers.
I was at God, what was it? The Three Rivers Comic Con about 2 months ago, whenever they were initially releasing that book, and they had probably, I don't know, 200-300 copies sitting on the Devil's Due table, and I swear to God, it looked like they were already dusty and they had put them out that morning.
Yeah,
there was so little interest, it made dust attached to them faster.
They even basically, to a degree, got the first cover banned, which anytime you can get banned, it's a beautiful thing. It's probably one of the greatest things that can happen to you. It's happened to me. It's happened to me a couple times, but the fact that DC did an injunction and said you can't do that cover, and then that created news. Josh just screwed the pooch from one end to the other with that book. He did it so wrong. And if Josh was smart, he would have looked at what I have done in the past and how I've done it and implemented that same method into that AOC book, and it probably would have been successful. She retweeted about it. They got 2 big news bumps out of it, one when it first came out and then one when it got banned. And then he did the other cover, which also turned into sort of a news story. And yet he can't sell any of those. He didn't go on Fox and Friends, and he didn't go on the 5. He didn't go on these shows, and it didn't, but he still got mentions, which is huge because that's a big audience out there. That's not just right of center. There's a lot of liberals and lefties that watch Fox as well. But, I did go on Fox and Friends with Peter Schweizer in front of 20 million people, and we sold out that day with Clinton Cash graphic novel. I mean, I got on the plane to fly home to Arizona, and a friend of mine texted me, which it was like 4 hours later, and they said, "You're sold out. Everything is cleared out." The publisher sent me the same email and said, we're into our second printing in 24 hours. And I just thought to myself, holy shit. It works.
Well, they were showing. I saw this one video. People were walking by at convention, and they had the AOC books there. The AOC comics were there. Resellers trying to sell them, and people were going by, and they were going up to these blue hairs and the purple-haired chicks walking by, and they said, "What do you think about this comic? Isn't this great?" They said, "Yeah, right on." They get the big thumbs up. Like, Yeah, could you give us $4 or $5? Give us some money
No
here.
way.
Buy one of them. Oh no, I don't have money. I don't have any money on me.
Wow.
But yeah, we love that comic. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you'd love it, but you don't want to buy it, and that's the problem.
Well,
People-
but we have the opposite on the right.
Mhm.
I've seen it. People
There's
on
money,
the right,
but there's no product.
there's no exactly, but and I see it not only with comics, but obviously you can point to a larger market, you can point to movies, and you can see it, whether it's The Passion, whether it's American Sniper, whether it's Lone Survivor, whether it's 12 Days, whether it's 13 Hours. Anytime the right hires killers like Clint Eastwood or Michael Bay or Marky Mark or Bradley Cooper or Mel, whenever they bring in really top tier talent and they spend money and to make a great product, which is what happens when you work with top tier talent,
It blows the doors off.
It blows the doors off, and it sets records like The Passion, which is why
The Passion of the Christ. Yeah,
I don't understand, why these people continue to pour money down just rat holes, black holes, which is never going to even give them a rate of return, let alone get their legislation passed or their politician elected. They need to stop pouring money into these think tanks and start working with creatives. And I think a lot of it is the boomer generation on the right looks at comics and TV and movies and film and animation as lowbrow entertainment.
It's trivial. Yeah, they see it as trivial.
And it's not. It's the most powerful
Right. Exactly.
mediums on the planet, and it's why the KGB invested 90% of their budget on subversion. Okay, and all you got to do is listen to Yuri Brezmenov, who is an ex-KGB agent. Who there's a ton of videos on him on YouTube. He's a fascinating guy. He's kind of a strange-looking dude, but this guy said, I love how Americans think that the KGB is all about espionage and James Bond and all this stuff. And he said, in reality, when I worked at the KGB, we only spent about 10% of our budget on spy and espionage and James Bond. He said, Hollywood really makes that into something that it's not. 90% of the money was spent on infiltrating education, the media, tech, and entertainment, because we understood that we could subvert the country from within. We could turn Americans on America, which is what you're seeing with the modern day left. So if you can subvert it from within, you never have to raise a standing army. It's the most powerful form of warfare that you can engage in. And the right has sat silently, passively over the last 30 years on their asses with their thumbs up their butts, saying, we're not going to get into this because the left dominates it. And it's like, well, yeah, the left dominates it for as long as you allow them to dominate it.
Yeah, there's a belief that those battles have been won already, and it's kind of what we said earlier. There's a reluctance from people to want to learn from each other, and the right could learn from a lot of these techniques. A lot of what you're talking about is I don't mean anything negative by it, but it's classic just marketing and business 101 for the straight entertainment industry, and the fact that people screw that up is fascinating, and they do put them in old holes that go nowhere. By the way, the AOC comic, there was absolutely a way that could have sold just fine. It wasn't a great product, but there were tons of ways that could have sold fine. But they blew the very, very simple marketing aspect. And a lot of the left-leaning political comics do this because there's this belief that, I'm not going to learn from any of the guys on the right that have sold those comics. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to study it. I know what I'm doing. And then it bombs over and over. And we see that both ways all the time.
It's true.
Well,
yeah, that's true.
You have a lot of the right that is quick to essentially abandon certain areas of a culture war that they're happy to cede ground on certain things. And I see it even with with people that are pushing. I mean, I think a lot of people see it. I mean, I've seen a lot of the people that are pushing crowdfunding. We don't need the stores, or we don't need the direct market. We don't need this. We don't need that. People have a tendency of, once they've already been pushed out of a certain space, to just cede that space permanently.
Yeah, that's true.
And I've said for a long time, I mean, one of the reasons why the comic industry has kind of been in decline is because we seeded normie spaces. We seeded we seeded the
grocery stores,
grocery store, and the pharmacy, and the 7-Eleven. And because
has magazines have magazines abandoned those?
No,
you know, those way. I mean, I still see periodicals at Walgreens. I still see Red Book. I still see Guns and Ammo. I still see Off Road Magazine. These things existed in the 80s and 90s. They're still selling. You know, I was talking about this yesterday on a thread. You know, once I saw that Phase 4, Marvel Phase 4, God, what a joke. I mean, is that for real, or is that a practical joke?
I don't know.
Thor, Love and Thunder. I mean, that's the Pornhub version of that movie.
It's
Love and Thunder. I can't.
Come see Thor's pounding hammer,
dude. That's the porno parody.
He's giving it to Jane
after the money's already They can't make a porn parody of Thor now because MCU has blown it. Pardon the pun.
It's the Brazers version.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I just looked at that and I just thought to myself, wow, because I was half joking and I was also half serious when I said that Endgame is the end of an era. It's over. You know, the MCU that we knew starting with Iron Man is over. It's dead. Well, it's never coming back.
I remember hearing. Yeah. Well, I remember hearing back in the 80s, there was a lot of parody type porn that was coming out at the time. You know, there's a video cassette era. And what was funny about that is I heard through the grapevine from a fairly reliable source on this, that Stan Lee and the executives at Marvel were paying under the table for people to do porn, to do those rip-off porn, parodies. Just to build the word of mouth about Marvel characters. Of course, they'd never admit that. They'd be like,
nobody would.
No, of course not. There was a brown bag. There was a brown bag with $10,000 in it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a brown bag with $10,000 in it that was handed off to a guy in a trench coat. And that movie and that video cassette came out a month later. So that's what happened.
Yeah, and you look at porn now. I mean, it's what is it? It's still about 90% of the internet. Most people don't know that it's still the plurality of what is online, and now they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of these films. There was one called Pirates back in like the mid 2000s.
I remember that.
Was Sasha Grey, and
that had a huge budget. I never saw that.
Couple million.
Just because I don't think I could sit through
porn. Yeah, for a porn movie, it was huge.
Porn.
No, but seriously, that it's true. Imitation is the best form of flattery, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was going on. But like that Phase 4 thing, I thought was just astounding. And I posted about it yesterday on Twitter, and I just said, look, if you're buying Marvel comics, if you're paying money for the Marvel, this new Phase 4 going forward, you're into self-abuse. And you need to, like a good 12-stepper, you need to come to terms with what's going on here. And it's over. Disney boiled the frog, whether it was the comics or the movies. It started when they started heating up the water when they bought Marvel. And the frog's dead at this point. They slowly boiled this thing to the point where nobody knew it was happening. But they've slowly diluted this whole thing, and now it's going to be relaunched into, this new phase, this new era, which is going to have Natalie Portman, who I find it ironic. She had to wear, nitrile gloves when she first entered the MCU. She didn't want to stick to anything. She had contempt for it. She thought it was beneath her. She went to Yale or something, or Stanford or whatever. She's like an Oscar-winning actress. Why is she in this comic book movie? It's got Chris Hemsworth, and he's kind of hot, so that's kind of cool. And it's Branagh, and Branagh's an established Shakespearean actor, so I'll give it a shot as this Jane character. Who cares? And now she's discovered that the only way to work in Hollywood is to work in a Marvel movie because it's the only game in town that's going to pay her anything. So now she's all enthusiastically behind becoming the next female Thor, when she didn't want to have anything to do with the Marvel Universe when she first entered it. You know, it was almost like Branagh had to like bribe her into getting into the role of Jane in the first Thor, and now she's going to be Thor.
Yeah.
You know, hallelujah. You know, I mean, this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
You know what's kind of weird is like the last big, I don't know if I'll use conservative, but like the last big like Christian movie that was released was like the Passion of the Christ, right? And you know, you have Mel Gibson behind that. At the time, you know, he's a Oscar-winning best director. He was at one point the biggest, you know, action star in the world. He couldn't get financing for that movie. No one would fund it for him because they were like, "Oh, we don't want to fund a project like that." He had to come
because the ideology was wrong.
Yes, but he had to come completely out of pocket, and he ended up making complete bank on it because there's this huge audience
I know,
that's frothing at the mouth, waiting to be entertained.
Well, look at the Action Bible, you know, which is drawn by Sergio Cariello, who's a Marvel and DC guy. One of my artists.
Oh, my wife loved that. My wife loved that.
The Action Bible has over 1 million copies in circulation, and it's a hardcover graphic novel retelling of the Bible. And again, you know, it's hard to get people to read. You know, there's a huge segment of the population out there that just won't even crack a basic prose book to save their life. My dad is one of those guys. He's just not a reader. The last book he read was The Right Stuff back in the 80s after the movie came out. Mm-hmm. That's a great book. But you know, I think there's a huge opportunity, you know, to grab those people who don't read with graphic novels, because my dad was able to sit down and read Clinton Cash in an hour, and he really enjoyed it. So I think, you know, there's a demographic there that's up for grabs in a big way, and I think it's also, you know, true for, you know, just graphic novels and comics in general. You know, it doesn't have to be a conservative, you know, political thing. I just think, you know, we want to grow the audience. We want to, you know, bring in more readers and get more meat in the seats. And that's one of the best ways to do it, is to appeal to those people that have no experience with comics whatsoever, but you can get them to sit down and read an actual book by way of adding in some really great visuals. The Action Bible is a great example of that. You know, it's not only able to get adults like me reading the Bible, but it's also going to be able to get kids, because it's got all that great visual artwork, which is, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, we're all competing with movies, TV, and video games. And what do video games look like? They look like live action. So, you know, our comics that we make, if we want to have them be competitive and have them be in the fight, you know, they've got to be equal to or greater than what's going on visually with movies, TV, you know, computer graphics that, you know, are basically on the level of live action within video games. This stuff has to look good. It really does. And part of that is hiring professional commercial artists who understand and have been trained how to make images which captivate, compel, and ultimately sell to people. You know,
it's got to be a good product. I think
it does.
People chase these markets. All these markets are up for grabs. I mean, one of the funnier / sadder things of the con this weekend, if you see the photos of you got Telmeyer there, who outsells everyone on that floor, and it's not close. And she's on this panel kind of doing these things, and the other writers are kind of talking over her, and it was sad to watch the interviews where you've got these people who are selling 1/50th of what she sells, and they're like wanting to tell her, oh, this is how the business is done. Oh, this is what I do as a creator. It's like, man, you got somebody next to you who, her and Pilkey combine all of your sales for your publisher, and you want to ignore that. Those markets are open, whether left-leaning, right-leaning, historical, kid-based, all the rest. There's plenty of money in it. There's plenty of money for all this stuff. The money's not going away. People want to spend it somewhere. You got to put out a quality product that's marketed well. Whatever your ideology is, you just got to put out something that's good. It's hiring good people, having good ideas, not being an idiot with how you market it, and you can make money. I think the people who have given up on it, or say things like, oh, the entire industry is going to blow up, oh, everything's going to die. Yeah, if you ignore it, if you want it to, I guess, you know, you can get out of it, but the money is there. There's no reason why.
And it's not a zero-sum game. You know, the pie can grow. It's, you know, it's not static. I don't believe that. I found it fascinating that the one person that was missing on the crowdfunding for comics panel is one of the most successful people in crowdfunding for comics. And his name is Brian Pulido.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Absolutely.
Where the hell was Brian Pulido? The guy's on like his 12th or 13th crowdfund, which averages what, $250,000 to $300,000 each time, and he does that off of like 3,000 people.
Well, I actually thought he was scheduled to be on that. I thought I saw.
Was he?
I think he was scheduled to be. He might have just not been there.
That would surprise me.
the one that Billy Tucci did.
Yeah. And frankly, Brian and Billy are really good friends, so I kind of figured that they.
I'm pretty sure that Brian was scheduled to be there. I think in the
maybe
description,
he had a conflict.
He might have. I think I saw in the description where it named who was going to be there, and I'm pretty sure I saw Pulido's name.
Good, because frankly,
Tim Lim just in the chat said he was scheduled to be on it.
Okay, well, I bring this up only because I had an interaction with somebody on Twitter yesterday who didn't even know who Brian was, and this person was saying that the crowdfunding is not sustainable, and I'm just kind of like, I keep hearing that, and yet Brian Pulido just continues to soldier on with, and now Brian has hired his own staff. He's got his own product fulfillment team. They have a warehouse up in an hour and a half north of me, up in Scottsdale, Arizona. Fran, his wife, is works with him, and he's probably got maybe, I don't know, it looks like a half a dozen to a dozen guys that are basically his product fulfillment company. And then he's got his art team, and he does crowdfunds. I don't know, it seems like every 4 or 5 months, and each one is wildly successful. It always exceeds its goal. It always seems to average somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000, and he does it off of, I don't know, like 3,000 or 4,000 backers. It seems like maybe a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So and Brian puts out. You can argue whether Brian's a good writer. That's pretty subjective, but the artwork I think is unquestionable. It's top notch. It's fantastic. It's beautiful visuals. Brian's a film guy. Me. He's much more of a movie guy and a film guy. He's always wanted to be a movie director. In fact, he's directed some films, some small budget horror films, and then he also got started in videos. He's worked on all kinds of stuff like Lenny Kravitz videos and all kinds of shit back in the 90s and the late 80s. But this guy is has got a method that works really well, and I am always impressed. And the other thing about Brian is that he keeps a very tight production schedule, and he shows up on time. If he said it's going to come out in May, it's going to come out in May. And I think to a large degree, that is the most important part of the crowdfund 3-part act is the product fulfillment. And if you are not punctual, I think that you're going to have a hard time getting people to show up again. And Brian,
I completely agree with that. And I think that people will automatically assume these comments are shot at one person or another. It's not. It's simply punctuality matters. Whether you're in the store,
yeah, I'll define who I'm talking about then. Kwanzaa, B. Claymore,
Richard
Pace. People who rob people.
Yeah. Okay. It doesn't have to be, and definitely there's different scales. There's people who are 3 to 4 to 5 years late and have no plan, like a lot of those guys, absolutely. But just it's not meant as a scolding. Nobody's tisk at anybody, but just punctuality. It matters. It will grow your business. And when people say that crowdfunding, is dying or this, it's not. Crowdfunding is a very viable source. It's clearly not dying. I will say, on the other hand, it's not going to be the only game in town. Like you said, it's not a zero-sum game. I think there are other people who take the opposite extreme of the entire industry is dying and only crowdfunding will be there to save it. That's not possible either. So it's both have to exist. Crowdfunding is a great vehicle. It's not the only vehicle. You should support it. We should learn from it. We should grow from it. People who are, the comics that are slightly late, let's figure out ways to make them not slightly late in the future. That should be the game.
Yeah, better. It's like Steve Austin, better, stronger, faster. How do we make it?
Absolutely.
How do we streamline it? How do we streamline ourselves? You know, nobody likes sending out messages via Indiegogo saying, "Hey, everybody, I've got good and bad news." You know, the good news is that we're making progress. The bad news is the book's going to be late. You know, nobody likes to hear that. It's
aim high, by the way. By the way, don't aim to beat Richard Pace. That's a shitty target.
Totally.
Do well.
Yeah. I mean, I look at all the guys who, you know, it's like anything, man. You want to be a better golfer, hang out with better golfers. Yeah. You know, and I study Brian. I look at Brian. Polito. I talk to Brian. You know, I try and get as much wisdom out of these people who have done well with the crowdfunding, so I can pattern my methods after them and hopefully have the same kind of success. You know, I mean, that's ultimately the idea, is to get better and better at this. But I agree with you. It doesn't have to be just a crowdfunding source, you know, on blood.
There's not enough money for just, I mean, crowdfunding alone can't hold it up. We've got to have lots of different outputs to make this work.
And why not have, and you know, I mean, I had one investor, I had one money guy on Blood graphic novel, who's a Hollywood guy. He's the guy that paid for the entire thing. And on Clinton Cash graphic novel, we also had a production company that was paying for everything. So there's ways of going out, and these people obviously own a part of the book, and they're going to be made whole on the book as far as sales before there's any kind of a profit share. And there's ways of doing those deals. Sometimes those kinds of royalties are staggered. Sometimes the investor is in the first position, meaning they have to make all their money back first before there's any kind of a distribution of a profit share. There's a lot of ways of doing these deals. You could even have a syndicate where you had more than 3 people that made up the core of the investors putting money into a book. I'm working on a deal like that right now, where we've got multiple investors putting money into an already existing best-selling novel series, which they want to turn into a graphic novel series, because they think that there is enough of the core audience they're going to be interested in reading a visual adaptation of this. And then they also think that there's a huge underserved audience out there that they can go out and get to that have never even heard of the book.
So, you know? Brett, what's your thoughts on, with the crowdfunding? Should the end game do these books that are aimed more, maybe are more conservative in nature or non-political? Do they need to actually make it into comic book stores and compete on the open market?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I don't think that it's crucial that they're on the stands, as long as they have the potential to be on special order, as long as you can order it. But, I dealt with this on Clinton Cash. We're going to deal with this again on Blood. Right now, I'm in a bidding war with 2 book publishers over Blood. They both want it, like in the worst way, because, it's a graphic novel done by Chuck Dixon and myself and Derlis Santa Cruz, and then it's going to be a movie. So, they see this push-pull marketing, that you can have similar to The Walking Dead, where you've got the graphic novel, which pushes people to the TV series that pushes people to the graphic novels. I guess there isn't a graphic novel anymore, which I thought was a great move, by the way. I thought that was really interesting what Kirkman did, off topic. But I think as long as you can get it for special order via the comic book store, if that's the way you want to do it, and then I think if you can do direct sales from a website, like Antarctic or like a Brian Polito, you can order any of his books that have been crowdfunded. You can order retail versions of them off Coffin Comics, and I think that's also part of what his staff does. They fulfill orders not only through the crowdfunds, but also through the orders off of his direct website. And then I also think there's something really important, which is all of us need to get in the Amazon game. We all need, to some extent, a way to get our books onto Amazon, whether we are having them stock it and fulfill the orders, or we just have a storefront where we're stocking it, kind of like an Etsy store. So Amazon takes a cut if you stock your stuff with them, obviously, and they fulfill it, but you get to take advantage of 2-day shipping. And who doesn't love that 2-day shipping? You know what I mean? And now it's going to become probably 1 day, and it already is in certain cases. So the market's changing, and I think that basically it's kind of that three-prong approach. Special order to the local comic book shops, you know, which is, I'm just not into giving Diamond more money. I just don't believe in monopolies. So that's kind of, that is the last rung as far as I'm concerned, as far as like, you know, going at the angle of getting it into the customer's hands. Diamond comic book stores. I mean, what is this, like 1989? Give me a break.
Comic stores, especially for these properties, are doing well. Comic stores, in many cases, there's a couple outliers. They are happy to order from other places. Give them other places to order from. They are happier. You're happier.
And they can order it off Amazon. They can order it from. They can order it direct if they want to do a bulk. If they want to order, you know, 12 or 15 copies, they can contact you direct through a web. I'm sure if anybody wants to order Brian Polito's books in bulk and get a discount, they can contact him direct. They don't have to go through Diamond. And that's a smart way of doing business, because I'm not going to tell you guys what Diamond takes as far as a cut, because I think that's kind of privileged information, but it's nearly 50%. That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
And then, and then
I'll say it's 42%. That's exactly what it is on my average.
And the publisher takes 50% too. So what's left over for the creator? Zero. That's why you have starving artists. That's why you have people that come in and out of this business and don't stay for very long, even when they're incredibly talented. And I'm sick and tired of starving artists. You know, I want my artists well paid so they can concentrate on the creative and making the deadlines rather than sweating to pay rent, because that's going to make for a bad product. If my artist is, you know, crouching in his bathtub, having a panic attack over being kicked out of his apartment or something.
So another thing I want to, you know, you're a marketing expert. One of the, I'm very frustrated with a lot of the things that Marvel does, DC, and one of the recent ideas Marvel had with marketing was they started like randomly creating variant covers, which isn't, you know, is interesting, I guess. But they put an extra page of content in each of them that was exclusive only to those, and it's really ended up screwing over comic shops and retailers where. How do I distribute these to my subs and my pools without notification on it?
Well, especially when you can't return anything.
Yeah, and they've distributed them randomly. So some shops got 10% of these covers. Some shops got 50% of these covers.
It's just a nightmare. It's a fucking nightmare, man. It's just another symptom of just an already really sick industry. You know, you got this one distributor that doesn't allow any returns. You know, the book publishing business, that's a 50% rate of return. Amazon has only like a 15% rate of return, which is why a lot of people self-publish and utilize Amazon and say, you know what, all you brick and mortar people, screw you. I want my money. I earned it. You know, I mean, you got 50% tied up in potential for returns, which all need to sell off, which could take, you know, forever. And I just look at the whole thing. It just compounds the situation when you have all these variant covers. It's more crap that you're going to get stuck with. You know, I remember when X-Men #1 came out, and a buddy of mine overordered. You know, the Jim Lee. You know, everybody bought the gatefold.
Everybody overordered.
Everybody bought the gatefold, but everybody overordered on the newsprint, on the regular. They were all newsprint back then, but it was just the regular cover, which was the cheap version, which was like $1 or something, as I recall. But yeah, everybody overordered, and they all got stuck with these X-Men #1s. And imagine having that problem, but having like 5 different variant covers. That's nuts. You know, what are these publishers trying to do?
50.
They're strangling. They're strangling.
You got to buy an issue. You got to buy an issue from a different title to get the variant title you want. It's just, there's a math to it. It does kill the industry. It does kill the shops. It's thinking that people don't want to do in the shops, and they don't have time for it. And I know that sounds pathetic for a shop to say, you know,
no, it's not.
Business. There's no time.
It's not pathetic.
There's not time to do this.
You have a window. You have a window of time to order, and you have to decide. I'm going to order this many of this cover. I'm going to order this many of this cover. These guys are asking for this one. These guys are asking for that one. And you're sitting there with your Post-it notes, and you're trying to figure out how many to order of each. And you don't want to overorder because you're going to end up with stuff that you can't sell. It's going to end up in the quarter bin. So it's like, what the hell am I going to do?
Well, and it's worse than that. You're ordering blind. I have a video coming up on called "Mind the Gap," and it's a term that is used in some of the shops for the wise fans. Basically, you're ordering #1 3 months before you're going to see it or more. you're going to have to order number 2 and number 3. You know there's going to be a decline, but now you're doing some kind of magical math to try and figure out how much it's going to decline. You have the insight in these insider programs coming on, the variant covers coming on. And then, hey, by the way, you've already ordered 2 and 3, and you discover that issue 1 swapped artists on you, and that A-list artist has now been a B-list artist, and the early buzz is going to be crap, but you've already put in your orders for upcoming issues, so now you're really hosed, and that is the screwed up part. And Diamond is a huge part of that, and they're also a huge part of why that the deals that's been struck are preventing some of these comics from going onto the newsstand. There's article about Target and some of these other guys wanted to put comics on the newsstand instead of Cosmo. They believe as these billion-dollar Marvel movies are coming out, putting some of those comics, at the end cap in a register would work, but they can't. It's insanity.
Those, buying at the grocery store, buying at the Walgreens, buying at the 7-Eleven, that's how you hook people. And then it's incumbent upon the local comic book store to clean them and fry them. And basically what ends up happening, and it happens to everybody, it happened to me, is that, I picked up an issue of Kitty Pryde and Wolverine at King Soopers, which is the largest privately owned grocery store in all of Denver, Colorado. It's still open, by the way. And I got that one issue of Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. I think it was issue 2 or 3. So I jumped in out of sequence and not knowing really who any of these people were. I really didn't. I was unfamiliar. I knew the X-Men, but I wasn't quite sure who Kitty was, and they were still calling her Sprite instead of Shadowcat, and it was really confusing. I knew who Wolverine was, kind of. I still hadn't read the Millar Claremont 4-issue run from 81 or 82. But what that ended up doing was driving me to Mile High Comics, because, oh, shit, this is a great story. I got to get 1, and I got to get the new issue. I've got 2. I don't have 1 and 3. So right there is a gateway to the stores. And I just don't understand what is going on at Marvel and what is going on largely with Diamond, because they just don't get it.
They locked in a deal in a time when the publishers were vulnerable, and right. They're a crap company. They're living on life support. They're having to go get external funding all the time. It's a place to work.
Does anybody here know the politics of everybody over at Diamond?
Well, I
do.
So yeah,
I do. And
I know my seller voted. I know that my contact person, my customer service person voted for Trump.
These people are all right of center.
Yeah,
they're all conservatives, and this is how they do business. So it's shameful, frankly, because these are not free market people. I just kind of look at what they do as just sort of shameless, and they have cannibalized this industry to a large degree, and they should be ashamed, because they could have been growing it and expanding it, and a lot of it is generational, from what I understand. You've got the old man,
and then you've got,
yeah. This guy needs to go. He needs to go. And I'm not talking he needs to be on ice. I just think he needs to fucking retire and find a deck chair with a boat drink and let his son run the business.
It's a true lifestyle. People use lifestyle business a lot to describe. I have just a different view of what that term means. It is a lifestyle business, meaning it's the business you're going to die in. That's how it's done. It's just we're gonna drift off that tail and then keep going golfing. And
I got an uncle like that. Yeah.
This particular situation that Wes was talking about, how are you dealing with this, Perch, as far as the blood splatter issues and the other issues that are coming up soon?
I mean,
how are you dealing with that when you've got like an extra page of content? You've got the variant that everybody actually does want because it has content that you can't get anywhere else, but they only give it to you one out of every maybe one out of every 3 issues. So you don't know how many to order. How are you dealing with this? How are you dealing with it?
We're upsetting people. I mean, there's not much else you can do. We don't have the bandwidth to have extra copies on the shelf just to hope that we get shipped an extra percentage, because we're not promised order 10, get 1. We're promised you're going to get some. And it's been 40%, it's been 10%, it's all over the map. So we try and take care of the people who are subscribers first, because that's your bread and butter. But some of them, there haven't been enough issues to put those out. And then we're losing a lot of walk-in traffic that comes in. looking now, I say a lot. Honestly, not many. The word has gotten out that these little one-page bonus things are garbage. So I'll just lay that out there.
Well, here's the thing. You've got Immortal Hulk though. That was the outlier. That was the outlier though, because that page actually had important information. It actually mattered. That's the outlier.
It mattered, but most
also
people
the hottest book that Marvel is selling right now.
Yeah.
Too. So it's like, holy crap, and I had a lot of really pissed off people.
Yeah. And that one shipped under, from what I understand, for a lot of people. But, Black Cat has been more the norm, where there's like, she's chasing a carnage infected rat out of her apartment. I mean, that's
birds.
Yeah. So it's a crap situation, but I guess the nice part, if you want to call it that, is that 5-10 years ago, people blamed the shop for these kinds of things, and today enough word has gotten out. People aren't blaming the shop anymore. They're blaming Marvel. So I don't know. It's not a good situation at all.
Yeah. Here's what I ended up having to do with that was everybody gets a regular issue now. They don't get the blood splatter issues. All of my subs, this is what I ended up having. All my subs get the regular issue. Any customer that wants the regular issue can buy the regular issue. I put all the blood spatters on the counter. First come, first serve. You come in, you have a sub. If you come in, you can swap it for free to one of the blood spatters. And, swap out your regular issue. A lot of people don't care. They just get the regular issue. But if you want the blood spatter, you can just swap it out. No additional charge. I'm not marking them up $10-15 like a lot of other shops are. And you have the regular customers, once the subs have decided whether they want to get one of the blood spatters or not, I'll sell them at cover price to the regular customers for, until they run out. And that's the only way that I've found to morally, ethically handle the situation. Because otherwise, why did he get one and I didn't get one? Why is one in his folder and not in my folder? So that's the only way I've found being able to deal with it.
Listening to you guys, it almost sounds like that Marvel and Diamond are conspiring together to put you all out of business.
Well, I think they're trying to leverage them against their customers to make them order more.
Yeah, they're trying to get us. Yeah, they're trying to get us to order the 1 and 3. They're trying to get us to order enough copies to where we can cover all of our pull list customers with those special covers, so we can make sure that they're all covered, and then we end up with this deluge of regular cover issues that we're not going to be able to sell
because they don't have the content,
right?
Yeah, and people don't want them as much because they don't have the content. They're not the ones that are, the regular issues are not the ones that are selling on eBay for $15 a pop.
Yeah.
So
these
Diamond just wants to survive for another 15 years. Guy wants to get another house. I mean, that's Diamond's game. Marvel, I think they're just squeezing every blood out of the stuff.
I'm a big believer that Joe and CB have been put in charge of basically the managed decline of Marvel Comics. They're marking time as they get closer and closer to fully outsourcing all 5,000 IPs to IDW, and they're already doing it. They're already doing that with IDW. They've got Captain Marvel and they've got Spider-Man now that they're licensing out. So
and Avengers and Black Panther.
They're going to be.
Here's the problem, though. Look at those sales on those that they've outsourced. Though they're only selling 5,000 and 6,000 copies a month.
But that's IDW's. That's IDW's problem.
Exactly. It's exactly. It's
think about it.
The quality fall off is incredible.
But that's
I bought some of those, and it was really horrible. The art was awful. The story was like something you'd have in preschool. It was absolutely terrible. If they're going to do that and they're going to outsource this, they're going to sell the IP to somebody else. License the IP to somebody else. That quality drop off is a bitch. And
but you're not taking into consideration the quality drop off that's happened at Marvel Comics over the last 10 to 15 years. They've already basically
better than what those other companies are writing.
Yeah, but it doesn't hold a candle to what they did when they were employing American commercial artists like Brian Hitch and others to make image. People forget that. The hottest team in town, the best team in the last, 30 years was a CrossGen. Alessi had the best of the best. And when they were on the verge of bankruptcy, Joe Quesada flew down there and took everybody out to lunch. And Joe couldn't solicit, but he could let everybody know that Marvel is open for business if anybody's interested. And what ended up happening was they got everybody. They got Epting, they got Laura Martin, they got Frank D'Armata, they got everybody. Chuck, they got everybody back. Maybe not Chuck Dixon, but they got everybody back. They hired everybody under the roof over there, and they had probably the best talent, and were making some of the best books visually during that era. And then basically this outsourcing to foreign artists, for cheap foreign artists, which has been happening over the last 10 to 15 years. That's where you've seen them basically dumbing down the audience, making them, I call it the soft bigotry of low expectations. So this is as good as it gets, everybody. So just deal with it. No more John Romita, no more Jim Lee, no more of that. Now we have this Cal art style, basically going on.
Well, I think that's why the back issue market is booming, because people are going back and getting the previous generations. What are you saying, Doc?
Well, what I was going to say is the problem is, it's IDW's problem, or whoever they license it to. The problem is that's fine for the term of the first license. The problem is it's not going to work beyond that first issuance of the license. It's going to be a disaster, because it's going to put whoever buys that license out of business, and then everyone else and anybody else who watches that and goes,
IDW's about to go out of business because of all their licenses.
Yeah, they are.
I know.
I was just going to say that Hasbro's Hasbro's been putting up with IDW for a long time, and they're not producing jack shit.
Well, see, Hasbro doesn't really care. They're still getting paid. And as long as IDW can keep getting idiots to give them money.
But that's Marvel's position as well.
I understand that. The problem is other people are watching the IDW situation. Other people in the comics industry are watching it. They're watching that licensing is turning into a black hole. And they're not getting revenue back out of it. And eventually people start asking for their investments back. They want return on their investments when they keep pumping money in. And if IDW or Dynamite or whoever ends up with the license, the cost. Now, it'll be great for Marvel. Marvel will be fine. They don't care. But it's going to put whoever buys it out of business.
Well, not necessarily. Just as they can do bad work, they can also do good work.
Well, I understand that, but the likely, let's just say, the likely outcome is that whoever buys it ends up out of business, and then now you have a license that has to get sold again.
Yeah, but Josh had G.I. Joe for years. I colored G.I. Joe for 2 years. My buddy Val Staples bought Masters of the Universe, for I think like 30 or 40 grand. I mean, that's the kind of money that can get you these.
But those are things. 7 to 10,000 book a month titles. They don't sell more than 10,000.
They used to. I mean, Josh was Spider-Man. Josh was selling millions of copies of G.I. Joe when
he was initially. Yeah,
he was absolutely when back in 2002, 2003.
Yeah,
so part of that, I think you can do it right if you hire.
That was into a healthy comic market. That was into a healthy comic market with over 8,000 stores nationwide, and now we have 3,900.
It was a healthy market with distribution. I mean, again, we keep circling back to the same point. It's the distribution isn't there, and this is something that whether past or future we've got to worry about. And this is circle back to crowdfunding, to whatever you happen to be. The distribution story has to be diverse, and I don't mean that politically. I just mean lots of options. There has to be a lot of ways to get those comics into the hands of people. That can save a lot of these things. And keep in mind, in terms of quality and Joe Q and the Amanat and a lot of the executives, they're on the Disney executive plan, not the old Marvel executive plan.
That's right.
They get revenue share on points. So when they're, or not revenue share, sorry, they're bonused on their point. And so as that group is making money, they're getting their bonuses. So if they can cut costs and negotiate a better deal with licensing and all the rest, they're doing great. And their whole arc that they're hoping to do is just move up that entertainment chain.
Exactly.
But and it's doing well. The Marvel movies are doing well. The licensing is doing well. The theme parks are doing well. Undoubtedly, it is going to decline. I'm not as negative, and I got beat up on it yesterday. The Phase 4 is not a oh my god black hole, but it's absolutely going to decline. I mean, but
absolutely,
we're
going to see at least a 50% decline.
Yeah, they're going to put the Thor title is terrible. They're going to put investments now into streaming because they want to secure their position there, as we talked about earlier. And all these things are fine. They're managing a business portfolio. I mean, nobody should shed any tears about Marvel or expect them to go away. It's what it does to the rest of the industry. If the rest of the industry doesn't catch up, start doing things themselves and finding these paths, that's where we're screwed. And DC will be like Marvel rapidly. They're already, I mean, they're all the right DNA is there.
They're starting to edge there, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with everything you covered there. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations over at Marvel because it's a much larger game now. And the other thing is nobody really has any skin in Marvel Comics. The editors don't want to be there. They see Marvel Comics as a gateway to Marvel Studios, which is where everybody wants to end up. So you end up with editors and assistant editors that have no intention of staying there. So what do they care? And
it's writers who have no intention of being there.
Who would?
They want to write real journalism. They don't want to write comic books.
It's a dead end.
People that love writing comic books that can't get in because of the nepotism involved with the political ideology chain.
Well, so and why? But in this day and age, why, as a creative, would you want to go and hitch your star to an 80-year-old IP that you don't own, you'll never own, and you're going to get pennies on the dollar when it comes to royalties?
For the love of the characters. For the love of the characters. And that's what I've asked people before. I've asked other writers, why are you still doing this? Why aren't you out doing your own thing? Because I love writing for X character. And I love writing for Moon Knight.
You like being broke?
Exactly. No, it works for a while.
They do. They would rather make less.
That's fine because that's less people I have to compete with in the indie market. Yeah. They can go be broke. I'm going to go get rich and be able to do more and more products and do volume. That's the other thing that people say is, we want the indie creators to have the same kind of output as Marvel and DC. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, well, I'm not Warner Brothers. I'm not Disney. I don't have that kind of money. If I had a fraction of it, maybe I'd be doing, 2 to 3 titles a year. But it's like, what's the frequency? Are they bi-monthly? Are they quarterly? In order to do monthly books, you have to be working at least 6 months in advance. That's how it works. Maybe a year in advance. That's the way the industry used to work in the 80s and the 90s.
How it should work, we should say, but I'm with you.
Yeah, I mean, nowadays you do a book, and this is from my experience in Marvel and DC. This doesn't go back. This goes back to like 2014, 2015. These editors these days are such a disaster that basically you work on stuff and it comes out like 3 weeks later. That's how late and behind the 8 ball they are because they're just not they're not competent at what they do. And that's a failure of leadership in the top levels of management, not to have people who are experienced to tutor and mentor these people. Jim Shooter and Bob Harris and these guys, they all ought to be paid mentors at Marvel and DC.
Well, it's part that now. It's part that incompetence of editorial, and it's part that the higher ups have forced them to live more and more and more hand to mouth when it comes to lead time. They don't want a large investment sitting there not getting a return yet. So the more books that you have in current production, obviously the more investment you have that's not generating a return. So if you're producing books 3-4 months out, if you already have people working on them, you're already paying them. And now you have this big chunk of money that's basically sitting there not earning return. And upper management is saying, we want to shrink that. And the only way that they can shrink it is by getting less and less and less lead time.
Yeah, it's sad because what you're describing essentially is something that I like to call short-term thinking in business. And it's it's the prevailing attitude in America.
They've been on short-term thinking for 6-7 years now,
which is whole outsourcing.
That plus
outsourcing cars, outsourcing clocks, outsourcing the shirt that I'm wearing. Everything is outsourced for cheap foreign labor in order to shrink that money that you're talking about from sitting and doing nothing, because nobody wants to think long term.
Well, that's one example. The other example is their variance scheme. I mean, it's a good short term.
It is. Yeah. It's like cocaine. It's a bump. Yeah, it's a bump. Yeah.
It's a bump. Variants and reboots are short term, but the law of diminishing returns starts kicking in eventually.
It's exactly what we are.
And you got to do more and more blow just to get the same high. You're always chasing the dragon.
Yeah, you want to bring prices down, per issue. You grow the pie. You do more. You do volume. I mean, that's the thing that everybody's absolutely focused. And the short term thinking business model is one that accepts that it's a zero sum game. That the pie is only as big as it is right now, and we have to cut up smaller slices for everybody.
Well, commies don't think you can make money. They think you just have to redistribute it.
That's right.
Right. That's exactly the point.
And then look at Japan. Look at Japan. Japan has this. Japan is all about long term. And sort of the Chinese, the Asian markets. They're all about planning 10 to 15 to 20 years ahead. And I look at the anime and I look at the manga market. It's healthy. They have a long term goal. They've been implementing that long term goal for a long time. It continues to be long-term thinking, which is why they have a healthy market and a healthy industry over there. That there are things that our market can learn from others, and this is not brain surgery. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just have to look around and say, hey, I want to be a better golfer. So who should I hang around with? Not some loser, not some loser. Absolutely. Go hang out with better golfers.
If there's one message here, that's coming out as a common thread for all this, it's we got to learn. You got to learn from the best. You have to keep trying to grow the whole situation, and planning is important. I'll get just very quick story, because this last week we had X-Men 22, which was a disaster, and I did a very depressed, saddy video, pure music playing in the background. No, but it was a sad end to this pathetic 9-month era. But what was most striking, what kind of gnawed at my mind, is in this issue, which is the final issue before the reboot, which in theory is the finish of a run. And Rosenberg did a long speech at the end of it about this was a dream since he was a kid to do this run. Inside the issue, we get to the big, quote unquote, big battle. And suddenly LaRocca's art vanishes, and we get a fill-in artist for 4 or 5 pages. Yep. Before going back, and you're like, it's a 22-page comic. What in the hell happened here? Where this big issue you couldn't do that, and what happened? The pages got lost. Literally got lost.
Got lost.
They're living in this. No, I'm dead serious. The pages.
Where does Salvatore live?
I do not know, but FedEx exists. Come on, it's not
the pages got lost. He got through writing all of his. He got through writing all of his project, and then he got through writing his project and went on vacation. Ended up in Bali. They had no cell phone access. They had no way to get any work out. He had his laptop with him, but couldn't get it printed out. Couldn't get any way to get the information out. So they ended up having the guy. They got some C-list artists to draw up 4 or 5 pages as fast as he possibly could, and they got it out and printed out within 36 hours.
But pages were. The key is a lot of that work was done. But it all goes back. It's the planning isn't there when you're living in a 3 month time frame to get a critical issue out before.
Wait a minute. This doesn't make any sense to me. This is not. I worked at Hi-Fi Design in 2003 when we were still sending CDs to DC because they did not have an FTP. Marvel had an FTP, and we uploaded all of the TIFFs every day to the Marvel server.
Absolutely.
And we had a T1 line. It was awesome. So basically what happened was Hi-Fi was on the west side of Phoenix, way west. I lived on the way east side. Now, if you dropped off at FedEx on the west side of town, you had to do it at like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. If you dropped off FedEx on the east side of town, you had until 4 o'clock. So it was my job at Hi-Fi to basically run the CDs, which had printed artwork for Birds of Prey and all kinds of stuff, to DC. But what I offered Brian Miller at the time, I said, look, why don't I was looking for an excuse to leave work early. And I said, look, I'll take it to FedEx and I'll buy us a couple hours of time. And he's like, hey, that'd be great, man. That's awesome. Thank you. So, basically we'd burn all the CDs and I'd run across town and drop these things off at FedEx. They'd still make it to New York on the same time. It was just the FedEx guys were the guys were stationed over on the west side of town and kind of worked their way to the east side over the course of the day. So they picked up everything later in the day. So it bought us a couple extra hours. Okay. But, and the irony there was that, DC is owned by Warner Brothers, who are like in the business of technology and shit. And we're still sending shit to them. We weren't even sending Bristol board inked pages. We were literally just sending CDs. So I'm kind of at a loss here. You've got a comic book professional that doesn't back up anything on a Dropbox, which the editor can be linked to. You have a comic book professional that doesn't have a jump drive. He's got his laptop, but he doesn't have a jump drive or something that has all those pages on. I've gone out of town before where I've sent pages. I took a jump drive just in case something happened.
Many do. I've watched.
And then you've got editors who have their heads permanently affixed up their asses, who don't think about things like this because they have no intention of staying in those positions whatsoever for any period of time. Again, short-term thinking.
Here's the thing with editors.
This is an
Editors
editorial
one
problem.
time.
Yeah. I mean,
editors at one time. Go ahead.
No, just very quick. No, you're right. It's fundamentally, it's an editorial problem. I mean, yes, the artist can do a lot of things, nothing else. And I don't imagine somebody's like racing to the mailbox and putting in real paper. I mean, they're obviously doing this with technology, but we had pages just lost. Where did they go? Did they get this? Just
exactly
stupid. At every level. This is stupid, and this is an editorial problem because this is not how you run a business. I'm sorry, Pele.
The editors are there to build in firewalls in order to, make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah. Here's the problem. Editors at one time were actually people. They were the knowledge keepers at Marvel and DC. They were the people that made sure that all the stories ran smoothly. They kept track of all the storylines. They made sure that all the characters were doing and acting in character. They were wrangling all the talent, making sure that the talent was getting everything, everything done. This color's right. That's right. Everything is right. All of these things are what good editors used to do for the comic book company. They were the lifeblood of the comic book companies. Now an editor is an intern, basically a glorified intern that runs a spell check. And that is the downfall. Part of the downfall.
They don't even run a spell check.
It's
Spider-Man wrong.
Yeah. Spadre Man.
Yeah,
I saw that. I was like, "Oh, it's Spadre Man."
Well, there's some good people up there, like Brian Cunningham, and there are some good people there that are group editors, but they are spread so thin. And they're given an impossible task. It's one thing when you have people there that want to be editors and want to be good at their craft and want to excel and become the next Bob Harris, become the next Jim Shooter, become the next DeFalco. They want to have a legacy there with these characters and be synonymous with these incredible runs. That doesn't exist anymore. So
that's because they don't even know who those people are.
Exactly.
You have a bunch of people that aren't comic people.
They're not in it for the love. And frankly, they're not really in it for the love of I say that they all want to go into film, and that's true, but they don't really even want to go into film for love. They want to go into it for money. They see that the comic industry is a nice stepping stone into a career in cinema where they're going to be able to make more money. And living in LA, even in Burbank, which is where all of the DC people live. The Valley, which is Burbank, used to be largely inexpensive. And it's why everybody kind of looked down on you if you didn't have that 3-1 area code and live in, LA proper. If you lived in the Valley, that's where they shoot all the porn,
Yeah.
But like, seriously, man, it's expensive now. It's really just as expensive on the one side of the mountain as it is on the other side.
Oh, I know.
It's crazy.
I'm out in LA enough. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, I lived in Venice for a year, and it was when I was working on G.I. Joe, and boy, you know, it was seedy and kind of weird back then. Now it's been completely gentrified, but even then, when it was kind of seedy and weird and sort of strange, I lived right next door to, literally next door to Venice High, you know, which is Grease and all kinds of movies. That's where I voted, was in the Grease gym, which is pretty funny. So like, you know, it's expensive already. So, you know, and it's kind of like Manhattan, you know, you've got sort of, you know, these two places where these businesses operate, LA and New York, and the living expense is really high. So, you know, the stakes are higher for people. And so everything is kind of more motivated out of money rather than, you know, I want to do this job because I love graphic storytelling. I love comics. They're, you know, you're basically crafting what is essentially American mythology. And
well, actually, you know what? Hold on.
the love of the game.
Well, here's the thing. I actually watched a little bit of, I kind of bounced around with some of the streams from SDCC yesterday. And there was one that was Rob Liefeld there with CB Cebulski talking about Major X. And he was all animated, you know, Rob was all animated because Rob's Rob. And you know, it's like the man's been on cocaine for the last like 35 years.
You could never tell when Rob was on coke. No, I'm just joking.
I know, because it'd be exactly the same. You couldn't get faster. He would time travel backwards.
Rob's just like the poster boy for enthusiasm and passion.
Well, but
and he always has been.
What confused me and what irritated me and I was so angry while watching this was because he was talking about how, you know, they were asking him like, how did you come up with all these things with like New Mutants and then X-Force and, you know, Cable and everything? And he's like, point blank, if you didn't sell, you didn't have a job.
Exactly.
And CB sitting there agreeing with him, and I'm sitting there trying to not reach through my telephone and strangle the man on stage, saying, well, why in the hell isn't that the standard now?
He doesn't. Look, a lot of people give CB the guy is not. He's a good guy. I can't say anything bad about CB. He's always been really good to me. He's a nice guy. I think he was good at what he was doing, which is,
seems like a good guy in a bad situation.
He's not the right guy for that job. I would go as far as to say is that he didn't want it, and they pleaded with him to take it, and he took it, you know, reluctantly. It's like I said, you know, he doesn't have any power. He's outgunned. You know, when you're dealing with Ike Perlmutter, man, I mean.
Santa Amanat runs the country.
That guy too, man. That guy too. So you know,
her.
CB and Joe are just basically marking time to where you know they can manage the decline and then move on. And what ended up probably happening is they'll be in charge of the licensing of the IPs, or at least the distribution of them and whatnot, keeping track of them. And that'll probably be folded into Marvel Studios at some point in time, because the IPs are the IPs, whether they're being, you know, distributed through cinema or through print. But I mean, that eventually is going to happen. I don't know if that's going to take 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, but eventually they will license those things out, because at this point, it just makes more sense to the bottom line to get out of this business of dealing with all these crazy freelancers, these wacky people. Let somebody else deal with that. They're going to have the attitude of Hasbro. You know, we own this property, and, you know, but we've got something which has been monetized into something even greater. So this can work as sort of, you know, promotional material. It can work as a way of maybe vetting certain stories, even though we're cherry picking old stories, you know, stuff from the past, basically. But CB, these guys, man, you can't get too mad at him. I feel bad for him. You know, they just don't.
You know, we talked about this a couple times. He's there he's a friendly face. He's somebody that's supposed to be an ambassador. He's coming in after Alonzo, who had an antagonistic relationship with a lot of people at these shows, and he's an ambassador. He's what in the tech industry you call him an evangelist. That's what he is.
Yeah.
And this isn't somebody who's making editorial decisions. This isn't somebody who's making big things. In terms of his talent search, he's searching off of a zero budget. So I mean, that's not exactly a good or a hard talent search.
Everybody wants him to be Jim Shooter, and that Marvel is over with. And I've gotten on people, kind of hard recently, and I don't really mean to, but I get irritated when, I just see people sort of lamenting Marvel Comics, when, rigor mortis has been set in for a long time, long enough to where people need to understand that, look, it's not happening. It's not going to come back. I understand that shop owners have to do the best they can. They have to turn chicken shit into chicken salad, basically, on a daily basis. But these people who pine over Marvel Comics need to get a grip and understand that the old days are never going to come back. And I don't mean, and I just come in with some tough love because it's the truth.
That's I've seen those tweets, and I think you're fine. I think it's also I wish people would get out of this more extremist view of how this all happened. This hasn't been 2 years ago this happened.
It's been 20 years.
Well, that's why I say that they really boiled the frog. They did it slow, and they did it very unassuming. And
I can tell you exactly when this happened. The exact moment I saw it happen was the Marvel Now imprint put the final nail in the coffin.
It was
because that was the shit.
Which one was that?
The worst shit.
12.
That was reboot number 4 of 58.
Yeah.
No, I mean
2012.
It's
that's when I realized that the way that Marvel is now.
What was going on in those books? Tell me what was going on.
It was after AVX.
Yeah, okay. It was.
I worked. That's funny. I worked on AVX. That's funny. Interesting. Because I thought AVX was pretty cool, actually.
If you got to go back further, people have a misunderstanding of the past, and including how, and this is why, by the way, I think the newsstand has not come back and why it struggled is that when you see people discuss things like, hey, the comics sold 200, 300,000 copies, and that was norm. That was at the newsstand. That was with returnability. They weren't those comics weren't getting into people's hands. They're getting covers torn off and shredded. That doesn't mean it's a bad business. It's just that was the business. So understand.
Think about that. Think about what you're saying, though. They had a return policy, which they don't have now, and yet they were and yet they were still printing 200,000 copies. That was the one of the largest print runs that I ever had was on Chaos Comics back in the day. It was obviously a much healthier market, but I had a comic that was inserted into Wizard, that went out to everybody. It was Lady Death Half. It was the prequel. It was before prequel was actually.
I've got that book.
Yeah. It was me and Stephen Hughes, and Jason Jensen, who was the regular colorist, was on vacation. So Brian Polito, looked at my pimply 18-year-old face and said, "Hey, do you want to color this?" And I was like, "Sure." He's like, "Great, I need it in 2 days." So those are the old fun days. But like seriously, man, you don't see a royalty share back in the day unless you were breaking 50. So it's like.
But distribution was there. That's the key.
It was, and that's the key. And I think if we can solve that distribution, and if we can figure out how to increase the pie and get volume back up, it's going to take the stress off everybody, store owners, shop owners, and then on top of that, returnability that needs to come back. That's huge. But you kind of build in a buffer. Behavior. You build in a buffer for that returnability, it sounds like, from what I'm understanding from you, if you can get that volume, right?
Yep, exactly. If you get that volume,
now the only time
with more market power, you've got a better negotiating strength with these other companies. And it also provides a level of competition that will generate better behavior. You will see better artists hired. You will see a lot more scale. The pie will grow.
Prices could come down. They could come down if we're doing more volume. And frankly, if we weren't also hand to mouth, within the big two, and that's what's going on here. The publishers are hand to mouth. Diamond is hand to mouth. The artists are hand to mouth. That's ridiculous. We're all operating under this scarcity. There's a scarcity factor going on here, whereas we should all be operating under abundance. Abundance will solve all these problems, including paying the artists more. Artists haven't seen a page rate increase in 20 years.
Sure.
You know, and
But
the cost of living goes up 2% every year, you know?
You're boiling the frog statement, I think, is really accurate, but it's not just Marvel, it's us. It's both the retailers, we've all been boiled into this system. We've all gotten to this point where
Well, it's a vicious cycle.
yeah, this is what we have come to expect. So we've acclimated to it, and we've tried to run our business this way. So when I hear people say, you know, hey, comics should just go back to $1.99, well, that would be a quick way to destroy all the comic stores in the country. We just can't do that tomorrow.
Can't do that. No, that's impossible. There's a number of
years.
So guys, it's 1 a.m. here, so there's only one topic left that we haven't got to, and I wanted to briefly get with you on this one, Brett. You know, I read a article maybe 2 weeks ago, and I just thought it was heartbreaking. It was George Perez basically explaining his time on 52 Superman. And I know you worked on the series.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you interacted with him. You know, what were your thoughts on that article and corporate interference and how it, you know, the fans and George Perez himself deserve to have a full Superman run that everyone could enjoy, and it was taken away from him by corporate interference and oversight. What were your thoughts on that? And what are your memories of when that happened?
Yeah, I remember that really well, because it was just an incredible honor and a thrill, you know, to not only work on Superman, work on, you know, a flagship title like that, but also work on a relaunch. And I was at San Diego Comic-Con with Tony Daniel and Mark Morales having lunch, I think the summer before the New 52 launched. And I asked Tony, I said, what's the deal with this New 52 crap I keep hearing about? This is just going to be, you know, this is another bump. It's another sales shtick. You know, it's just a stunt.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's, you know, I was just kind of being, you know, cynical about it. And he said, no, he said, I've talked with Dan and everybody, and they really want this to be something more. It's got to be deeper. It's not going to be something that's going to be short-lived. It's got they have long-term plans. And he sort of described it sort of like similarly how Marvel booted the Ultimate Universe. That's kind of what this was sort of to be, sort of in that sort of same vein, relaunching things, kind of like Ultimates, relaunching things in a modern world and making things modern and a little bit more contemporary, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. If, you know, however, you know, the only way to really do that is to probably hire Mark Millar, unfortunately. So basically what ended up happening was my buddy Brian Buccellato, who was also writing The Flash and coloring The Flash with Francis Manapul on the New 52, got assigned to color Superman, the New 52. So I came on as we were splitting those books. I came on as an assistant because he was really, really spread thin. And then I ended up taking it over. So I wasn't on the front end. You know, I was basically came in as it was being produced. And then once Brian left, I started working with Matt Idelson and the editors and everybody over at DC one-on-one. But I had already known some stuff about what was going on with Man of Steel. Basically what was going on around that time was Man of Steel was in the last days of, I think, principal photography. And there was a problem. Nobody really knew what Chris Nolan and David Goyer and Zack Snyder were going to do. They were very secretive about the whole project. And so what DC didn't want to have happen was this relaunch of the New 52 of Superman to conflict with Man of Steel, because Man of Steel was, you know, obviously taking precedent as far as relaunching Superman, the brand, everything to a whole new generation. You know, you're trying to rope in the Gen Xers that grew up on the Donner 1978, which is the canon. You know, that's the standard bearer for everything. Probably still is, maybe in some ways still today. Not only for Superman, but for almost all comic book movies. What Donner did with that first Superman. That's kind of the template in a lot of ways. So basically what happened was George was just hamstrung completely. And I heard about a lot of this after the fact. You know, Brian told me some things, and I learned some things from Matt Idelson. And Hi-Fi Design, my buddy Brian Miller over there was coloring a Man of Steel prequel, like a 6 or 7 page little story that was supposed to be sort of a prequel to Man of Steel, because it was right on the verge of it coming out. And I remember talking to him, and I was saying, because he emailed me and he said, "Hey, I need some help. Can you help me color this Man of Steel thing?" And he said, "If you do, I've got all these NDAs you got to sign." And I said, "I'd love to, but I'm coloring Perez. I'm coloring New 52. And he said, "Oh," he goes, "Okay." He goes, "Then you're busy." I said, "Yeah," but I said, this is a nightmare over here. I said, "What do you know about Man of Steel?" And he said, "Nothing." He said, "I don't know anything." He said, "All they gave me was like 3 or 4 different stills from principal photography to go off as far as ref, and they're all in black and white." So he said, "I don't know the colors of anything." He said, "It's just a mess." So, there was a real disconnect between Warner Brothers and DC as far as even communicating with this 7-page story that was directly linked to this gigantic $250 million movie that they're about to drop, $300 million movie, whatever it costs. And it was all about the secrecy, keeping Man of Steel under wraps. Nobody knows anything, including the people who were crafting the comic books that are supposed to be similar to what's going on screen. And that was the whole thing, was that not only were they going to relaunch Superman and make it modern and contemporary, along with all the rest of the 52, but they also had Man of Steel, which they also wanted to not mess with. They didn't want anything to conflict. They didn't want anything other than the loss of the red underwear. There's not much there. And on top of that, I think that you have probably a little bit more of a darker, more loner Superman in Man of Steel, and that was certainly the portrayal of the Superman in the New 52, especially the Perez run. He was definitely more of an outsider, and that came about through, I think, Goyer and Snyder and Nolan talking about, kind of in a realistic sense, what would it be like to be, an alien? Even if you were raised, you'd always know you were different, and you kind of have to live a lie. You have to lie to everybody every day with these glasses on. That's not really who he is. So that's kind of the angle that they were going. George, I don't think, really liked that. I don't think that was really, that wasn't his generation Superman. And I think that, I think it was kind of a generational sort of divide when it came to George telling that story, I think in a way that he was passionate about. But for the most part, what I got out of that was that George was told to basically tell a milquetoast story that didn't make any real choices, didn't take any risks, because it couldn't. Mm-hmm. Because if he did, then it would be compared to Man of Steel, and they'd be like, "Oh, there's no continuity here," or this is a different Superman, and I thought they were supposed to be similar. So DC back then was actually thinking in the right way. Hey, we want to be like the movies. We want to have some continuity. We want to have some recognizability between these two different mediums, so we can have a crossover. The people that like the movies can go and read the New 52 Superman and feel like they're reading a similar character in a similar world. And that's what I tried to bring to the coloring and the artwork, was a real cinematic quality and a cinematic feel. And I was watching a lot of Zack Snyder stuff at the time in anticipation of Man of Steel and trying to figure out, how do I make this look like sort of a Zack Snyder sort of looking comic? Jesus Marino, who was the artist, and Nicola Scott were also doing very cinematic layouts and a look, and I was following that. And George, just kind of ended sort of an impossible project. If George was able to talk to Zach or talk to David or talk to Chris Nolan, or if upper level management was able to talk to them and they were able to convey things to George, then I think it would have been a better scenario. But to a large degree, you just sort of look at the villain in that whole run. It was just wasn't very interesting. From a visual standpoint, we all tried to do our best to make it more interesting, because there just wasn't that much on paper. And I don't fault George at all. Unfortunately, he got blamed, and he got a lot of bad reviews, and people tore it up. And fortunately, they never tore up the art. that was the saving grace of that book. I remember a lot of the reviews, and I read a lot of them, all said the same thing, or in one way or another, they all kind of said, "Look, this artwork is top of the line, and if the art was on if the story was on the level of the art, this would be a generational defining Superman book. And they have all the right tools. They've got a great writer, they've got a great creative team. And Jesus was only on, I think, the first 4 issues, and then he had a conflict, so they had to bring in Nicola Scott. But what they did there was they transitioned from a really strong artist to an equally strong artist in Nicola. So there was really no drop off in quality, just a style change, and I helped make that style change, that transition, as easy as possible because the coloring stayed the same. And everybody, Matt Idelson, everybody was really happy with everybody's work. We were, it's like I said, we were really given a very difficult project. It was kind of designed to be, I don't want to say it was designed to fail, but it was definitely designed to not be great, not be bold and huge and big and explosive and amazing, like, kind of like that Flash New 52 was with Brian Buccellato and Francis Maniple. That paved the way for that CW Flash TV show. And that Flash, that was the best-selling Flash series of 40 years. So, they knocked it out of the park in a lot of cases on that New 52. They did some really great, interesting, fun stuff, and they made some hard choices, some of which are good, some of which were bad. But at the end of the day, as an artist, if you're not making hard choices, you're not doing your job.
Superman was the odd one out in that. Superman
he really was
the odd
man.
one out in action on New 52 because Batman had the introduction to the Court of Owls, and you had this amazing Batman story. Flash was running on all 12 cylinders.
Yeah.
You had the Wonder Woman was strong. You had all these characters that were so strong. Justice League was so strong during that time, and Superman just sucked. And it wasn't the artwork. It was just a really weak story.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, man, some of the one of the proudest moments of my life was taking my mom into Mile High Comics in Denver, and buying a copy of Superman that I had worked on, for her. This is the woman that bought me, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way when I was like 4, and used to take me to Mile High Comics down on Broadway once a month. When to buy the back issues that I was getting, here and there at King Supers and at the 7-Eleven, fill in the gaps. So it was really special, to be able to say, to show my mom the investment paid off. The investment in believing in me and supporting me in my dreams to become a comic book artist brought me to buying Superman as a kid to now working on Superman. And that, granted, that wasn't a successful
it was beautiful.
It sold in the 200,000s. I think the first run was 120, 150, and then it had a second run, which was in 6 figures. It did sell. The drop off from the first issue, I think, to 6 which was the arc, was pretty dramatic. I think it ended up like in the 50s or 60s because people were just disappointed in the story. So, but regardless,
the other factor there was that DC at the time did not a poor job, didn't do favors of promoting the Morrison book higher in a lot of cases, and it was a prequel that didn't help. I mean, just in stores, a lot of confusion about which was the important one, and Morrison's not the most giving guy in terms of his scripts either. So it was sandwiched between a bunch of unfortunate situation.
We had some elements from the Morrison run that were in the interiors, and I had no idea what the hell to do with them. I was just because it hadn't come out yet. Nobody knew, and I couldn't get any notes from anybody. I couldn't get any artwork out of that creative team so I could match it, or at least have some continuity. So I just winged it, and you've got that T-shirt at Superman stopping a train or something, I think in that Perez run, and a couple other scenes with him, and I just worked off the covers off of the solicitations that I had seen, and that seemed to work. I mean, at the end of the day, it's kind of like I'm proud of the work that we did from the art team. We did our best, and I think all of us have, and George did his best too, man. He doesn't deserve the ire. The editors don't deserve the blame. It really comes down to Would it have been smart to have a tie-in to Man of Steel and the New 52? Absolutely. Totally. That would have been really cool, I think, because I liked Man.
I remember the chatter around in the comic book shop at the time, and everybody
they were hoping it was.
This is a beautiful book. Everybody's like, this is gorgeous. You know, it's absolutely gorgeous. You know, I want to hang this up on my wall. I wish the story kept up with the artwork. That's what everybody was talking around about the shop at the time. So.
Dude, it's a tough one because, you know, as you know, for me, from a personal, professional standpoint, it's a dream to get to work with somebody like George, and it's an even bigger dream. You know, then you kind of compound that by working on one of the largest visibly known properties in the world, which is that S, that you know, that chest plate. You know, it's like Coca-Cola. It's like Batman. Everybody, you can go to Uganda and they'll know exactly what that is. You know, that and a Land Rover. So, you know, and on top of that, you know, you get to work with top tier talent like Jesus Marino and Nicola Scott, and I just adore those two. It was a great experience. So it's funny. It's like when I think of the New 52, I have really positive. You know, I'm like, it's all aces, man. It's all, you know, it's a beautiful thing, regardless, you know, of kind of how things fell apart with the story. But that being said, I also think that it could have been so much more, like, you know, like kind of like, it
was Suits interfering with your creative process. It was that's what happened. It was
that's exactly right. The suits got involved, and the right hand had no idea what the left hand was doing, and that was all about, you know, that's Hollywood. They always try and keep these things secret, and there was a real opportunity there, but you know, it's over with. So, but George, you know, George is a great guy, and you know.
Brett, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and joining the panel. I think it was a really interesting discussion. We actually got through everything that we wanted to, but it was all it was in a different order than planned, but I think it all flowed really naturally. I don't think anybody probably even knew we had anything really planned until the end, to be completely honest. But,
it was a real pleasure, and I learned a lot. You know, you guys who own the stores, you know, you know, it's creatives and store owners need to start talking more, because I think that's how we're going to solve a lot of these distribution problems. Yeah. And I'd love to work with you guys going forward on all the stuff that I'm doing. You know, I think in a lot of ways, you know, just kind of like the indie market sort of cuts out the middleman, these big publishers, we can cut out Diamond and start talking amongst ourselves on how to solve some of these problems, you know, because in this day and age, I just don't see really anything that's stopping us from doing that. You know,
well, that's what Alterna does. That's what Alterna does. Is we just buy directly from Alterna. We just buy the big counter boxes now. They ship us, you know, once a month or once every 2 weeks, whatever it is. And you know, they just here's your big huge box of comics that you can put right there next to the register. They're $1.50 a piece. Go sell them. And
do those guys have a return? Do the guys have a return?
Yeah, there's returnability there. Yeah.
Wow. What
sharing program too?
What's the rate? What's the return rate on that stuff?
He said it's really low so far.
Yeah.
It's like less than 10%.
Yeah, it's smaller, so people are ordering low. So they're ordering more what they can predict. So of course it's going to be lower, but the product has a lot of elements to it.
But it's still advantageous, more advantageous for you guys.
And people don't complain, and the customers don't complain. They love them. They're like, oh, and if it's an off issue, it's $1.50. You know, it's not a big thing, but there's very few off issues. You know, the Blood Realm comic that came out, man, we sold like 300 copies of Blood Realm. Wow. There is no other new book that I have sold in the last 5 years that has sold 300 copies of one print run. So
sounds to me like there's a path between Peter Simeti and Brian Pulido. That's kind of what it sounds to me, you know, as far as the future of the medium.
Yeah.
So which is great, because that means the future is very bright.
And one thing about Peter is he loves it. He absolutely loves what he's doing. And you could tell that passion in everything that he talks about and everything with Alterna. And he's gifted in the way that he can communicate that passion to others. And if people just get a chance to talk with him, and I talked with him, and he is just this brilliant, motivated, impassioned person that loves his business and wants to see as well, you know, not just the success of the medium, but the financial success too. And he wants it to succeed, and you can tell just by talking to him. And it's infectious. It's very infectious.
So, yeah, I also want to thank Perch. Thank you so much for dropping by. Tons of great knowledge for your perspective as a retailer. Pele as well, and Doc, you're a whale. I was going to throw you in there a couple times, but you were jumping in on conversation. But it all went really well. I want to thank everyone who joined us in the chat. It was a great conversation, and hopefully we can do this again soon, because I think it was very enlightening for not only everyone on the panel, but I think the viewers as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. It was great, and I need to get a bunch of you fell off my connections. I was connected to Brett on Twitter some time ago, and now neither of us are connected. Nobody knows how these things happen.
Dude, my Twitter feed, Twitter's just been so wacky. I have to go back and follow people. Twitter unfollows.
I've been unfollowed from Perch like 3 times.
Well, and I don't know about you guys, but like GIFs and photos haven't been loading. You have to refresh the page. This new Twitter looks awful. God, it's just like
it's a mess. Yeah,
it's an eyesore. Yeah,
it's weird. Yeah, it's really